and welcome to Oddie's Angling TV. This is the 5th of January, it's 2013, and this is our very first video. Now, we're at Maynooth Fisheries and we're fishing for carp. We've had a week now of fairly mild conditions. And I say fairly mild, unseasonably mild. We've been hitting sort of anywhere between 10 and 15 degrees in the daytime, and nighttime temperatures have been around the 8 or 9 mark. It's overcast today. Most of the other days have been fairly sunny, but we're fishing, as I said, for carp, and I'm going to give you a quick run through of where I'm fishing on the lake and why I picked this spot, and also have Mark fishing up in the next swim, and we'll take a Gansey up there and we'll have a look and see what he's doing in his spot. So as I said, I'm going to have a quick look at the tackle that I'm using to tackle this particular water. I'm also going to show you the swim that I'm fishing, and I'm going to give you the reasons why I picked this spot. Now, the reason why I picked this spot is because it's the closest spot to the car park. In fact, it is actually the closest spot to the car park, but that's not the reason why I picked it. You're very lucky on a fishery like this that it's managed and it's run, and there's always a lot of anglers on here. There's 7 anglers as we speak, and you're always lucky because you get a lot of background information of what's going on, and also the bailiffs here are very good at trying to put you on the fish. Now, kind of my first gut reaction of fishing this particular lake, because it's a lake of 2 halves. There's one sort of shallower end and there's one deeper, slightly deeper end, and naturally in winter months I would always opt for the slightly deeper water. But the bailiffs were telling me for the last week a lot of the fish have been shown just up here in this top end of the lake, and out in front of me I've got some kind of interesting spots to fish to. We've got a small island just here. I have a rod about maybe 5 foot away from that, and you know, the bottom is kind of weedy. We've got a lot of chod out there, a lot of weed. There are clear patches, but to be honest with you, I don't want to go casting around too much in case I do frighten off anything that's swimming by or in the area, because I'm only here for a short session. This is basically a 2-day session, 1 overnighter, and so I don't actually have that luxury of setting out and finding my spots. So I'm trying to fish a rig that's going to allow me fish over that kind of weedy, choddy kind of, and the weed isn't that thick, but it is like a blanket weed on the bottom. There are clear areas if you can find them, but as I said, I've got literally one spot just here off the island, which I know is a producing spot in the past from other anglers, and over to my other rod I actually have a gap between the 2 islands, and there's a nice deep hole in there that tends to be kind of weed free most of the time, so I have it in that hole. Now, the average depth out there is about 3.5 to 4 foot. The deeper hole is, I think, around 7 or 8 foot. And then just off the island, there is kind of like a little bit of a trough, and that goes down to, I think, around 5 foot. So I kind of know the topography, and I should do, because at the end of the day, I actually did design this lake many moons ago with the previous fishery manager. And this used to be just a field, and we came in and we mapped it all out, and the diggers came in and they dug it all out to my specs. Things have changed a little bit because they put in a few little features that I kind of hadn't legislated for, so I have to kind of treat this as a new lake every time I fish it, because each swim I haven't fished and I don't know, I have to kind of work it out like the rest of anglers do. So that's where I'm at. I've got my 2 rods out fishing, and bait wise, so look, this is my first session on this water in about 4 years. There's a lot of bait going into this lake all winter long. They've got boilies going in. The management here also feed the lake with vegetable feed, and that's all vitamin C'd out so that it keeps the fish nice and healthy. And as I said, a lot of boilies going in, and I know the Grange has gone in, the Cellar's gone in, a lot of mainline stuff. So rather than try and compete with that or try and go in with a bait that I'm not sure about, I've opted for the real easy option, and that is to go in with some maggots. So I'm just fishing plain old maggots, because I know they're an instant bait. The carp are going to munch them. If they come across them, you know, you're in with a chance of certainly hooking a carp. It's a bait I've done very well on in the past. if I was a little bit more au fait with the lake, if I'd fished here a little bit more often, I possibly would have been more interested in putting in sort of maybe a food item like a boilie, but I don't have that luxury, so I've come as a, you know, a quick hit and run, and for me one of the best baits for that is maggots. So we're going to have a look at the gear I'm using and the rigs I'm using, and let's get into that now. This is a setup I normally fish with. I use a Solar Worldwide pod. It's the best pod on the market in my opinion. Maybe not for fishing the big foreign waters where you might need something like the Solar Globetrotter, but for small intimate waters like these, this is a cracking pod. Stable as anything. You can get a really nice low profile with it. It's fully adjustable. I use always the Solar buzz bars with the posi lock system. It means I can align everything up really nice and handy, and I use the Solar butt rests as well. They're, you know, sort of really good at gripping the reel seat, and they lock everything in firm. Rod wise, I'm using NGs, Century NGs. These are 3.5 pound test curve rods. Sounds like a bit of overkill for such a small water. It's only 4.5 acres, but these have an amazing these are a player's rod. They're not a casting rod, they are a player's rod, and they have an amazing parabolic action, real through action, and whilst you can still lump a lead out a fair distance, you're never going to really hit the long distances, but you certainly will get a nice distance on them, anything up to about 115, maybe 120 if you're a good caster and you have good technique. I'm using the Daiwa Infinity reels. Again, they're a real big pit reel. I've used them for a long time now. These have been, oh, I'd say I've had them for about at least 6 or 7 years now, and I have to say I absolutely adore them. They're a great reel, very functional. They look great, but they, you know, they've just never missed a heartbeat. Excellent drag systems, excellent bait runner system on it, and they have that sort of tapered spool to the front where it's actually wider at the front of the spool rather than coning down. At the time, Daiwa felt that that would be a better line lay system, or certainly for casting it would give it a bit better welly. A lot of the newer reels, you know, looking at the Baziers and stuff like that, they have a longer tapered spool, so who knows. Indicator system here, well, I've got Solar chains, Solar bobbins. I wouldn't use anything but Solar, to be honest with you. I just find them fantastic. Very functional, they look nice, they do everything they're meant to do. And most of all, they register a fish when you do get one, which isn't happening at the moment. Delcom alarms, not a fan of Delcs. These aren't mine, they belong to my buddy Mark down the bank. I've used pretty much every bite alarm on the market. I mean, I've used the old Optronics, I used the old Les Bamford Optronic conversions when they came out. I've used Daiwa Sensortrons, I've used Fox, pretty much all the Fox range from DXRs, RXs to EOS-Rs, I've used a lot of them. And my last set of EOS-Rs were beginning to give me a bit of jip, and I decided to get rid of them. I bought a set of ATTs, the silent head jobbies, and I had that niggle. I like the look of them and they're very functional, great little alarm system, but I had this worry in my head that if the receiver went down for any reason, I've no audible indication system, you know, where at least with, if you have noise coming from the box at the front and your receiver, if one goes down, the other one's going to pick it up, and you know, you're in business. Delcs, as I said, are not my favourite. I don't like the look of them, but more importantly, I don't like how they sound. And now we're being pedantic, you know, this is all about like. They're an amazing alarm system, they're very, very functional. I've used them all weekend and I've not had a problem with them. They don't give me false bleeps in the wind. You know, you can turn the sensitivity to the way you want it. They're a functional alarm. They're a top end, high end alarm, and they have a huge devout following. But what I have actually bought is a set of NXTRs from Fox. Now they're on their way. I should have them in the next week or so. And I'll obviously do a review on them. But I just like Fox alarms. I think they're a great alarm system. The only other thing I'm fishing here that's maybe a little bit left of field is I'm using captive back leads running off into the lake to pin the line down, and they're by Fox. I find them the only way to use a back lead, because the minute you hook a fish or the minute you wind in, there's no snagging up here at the bottom. they just ping off and you're free to play the fish. Line wise, I'm using Fox soft steel. This is 15-pound breaking strain. It's in the camo Fox soft steel. Soft steel has never let me down. It's a reel line I absolutely adore, I love. So that's my basic setup that I use for carp fishing. I use it for pike fishing, and it's a solid performing setup. So apart from the bite alarm heads, everything else, as you see in situ, is what I use, and I can thoroughly recommend it. You know, this is, you know, when you've used something for as long as I've used this setup, you learn every niggle, every problem, and you know, you tend to winkle out the good stuff from the crap that's out there. And also it's very hard to buy crap tackle these days, because a lot of companies out there, the only way they survive is by making decent gear. So you know, it does actually then get down to personal taste, but I have to say I have found this a great little system. You know, this is it's functional, it works, and if only the carp would play ball. Right, so it's evening time, it's about 4:30. We've got about another 20 minutes of light left, I would imagine. Nothing to talk about all day. It's gone very quiet, no fish boshing. This morning there was a fish boshing over in the bay at the top. Nothing to talk about. I haven't seen anything, and I have been keeping an eye on the water as best as I can. That's an important thing to do, is when you're winter fishing. I know it can sort of be drawn into the bivvy a bit, but you're better off trying to stay a little bit, you know, sort of observing the water. Look for a fish and cast on it if you see it. Now, where am I at? As I said, rig wise, I've changed my rigs around a little bit. Notice that the nearest rod here on the edge of the island has been sort of getting a lot of weed on the line coming back, a lot of weed on the lead. Now, it's not deep weed, but it's enough to make me a little bit concerned. So what I've done, I've put on a quarter chod rig, and I've put a good drop between the top bead and the bottom bead, so that, you know, it can sit on top of any of that weed. PVA bag full of maggots on a mag clip, and look, we'll see what happens. It's, as I said, it's 4:30 now. Talking to the guys in the syndicate, that most of the fish over the last while have been coming around between 3 and 6 in the evening. Now, winter feeding spells tend to be very localised, so I would imagine we're in the hot spot now for a run, if we're going to get one. Week by week that does change, but at the moment it's the only bit of knowledge I have to go on. So I'm kind of sitting on the rods, and I'm hoping something will rattle off in the next hour or two. If it doesn't, it might be a quiet night and maybe something early in the morning, who knows. Whereas in summertime you get an awful lot of action throughout the day, and you can nearly set your clock to those hours that it happens at. In winter I find it much more longer periods between the feeding spells. You may get 1 or 2 a day, and you know, you could nearly set your watch to it, because if it happens at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 in the morning, the next day, if it's going to happen, it's usually in and around those times. It's funny how it goes like that, but that's what it is. So, as I said, I've got bait just out towards the island there. It's fairly clear out there, so I've just kept a standard 7-inch rig with a running lead on it, and it's caught me a lot of fish in the past, who knows tonight. And as I said, a chod rig on this one, because that one's a little bit more mucky out there, and a little bit more debris and a little bit more weed. So look, it's going to be lights out in, as I said, about 15 minutes now, 20 minutes maybe max. So that'll be the end of my filming today. So look, we'll catch you up in the morning, hopefully with a fish to show you, but I'm not going to hold out on that one. It's still very mild. I've been in a t-shirt for some of the day. It's been probably about 13 degrees in the daytime here. It's not to get below, I think, 8 or 9 tonight. I mean, it's perfect conditions for catching fish, but fish have to know that as well. and sometimes they don't, so we're just going to have to play this one by ear. Anyway, as I said, good night, and we'll catch you in the morning. Okay, here's a quick look at the rig I started off using. I quickly changed over to a chod rig because of this, which was coming in. I was getting an awful lot of weed all over the rig. Weed's not very deep, you can tell by it. It's that kind of, it's nearly grass-like. But what I came in fishing with was a basic running rig. I had some tungsten tubing to keep it pinned down. I'm fishing back leads, and that's why I was fishing the running rig. I have a 3 1/4 ounce lead on, 5-inch coat, you know, these sort of coated braided hook links. This one is by Kildare. It's the stiff version. I have to say it's really superb, really like it. Fished down to a size 10 wide gape, and actually I think that's one of the curver hooks actually by Kildare, and then it was onto a mag clip full of maggots. Now usually this is a banker rig, works every time. For me, I've rarely blanked on it, and today's the first time. I have a little loop at this end so I can quickly attach a new hook length onto the quick change link here that's held in the buffer bead. Now normally this is a good setup, good rig, it works well. The reason why I changed was because I was getting so much weed over the rig. I was worried that the presentation wouldn't be as precise as I'd like. So what I did was I moved over to a chod rig. The only difference is on a choddy, you normally have a very short hook length. It's where the lead is at the very bottom, and this is fished like a helicopter style up the rig with a bead to where you think you know, the lead is going to sink into the weed. I know it's only 1 inch or 2 thick, but I was fishing the bead about so high off the lead, but I was still using a very long hook length for the chod rig. This was about the same size or same length of hook rig I was using, and again with the PVA bag full of maggots with them on the lead clip. So yeah, it was just done purely to try and winkle out a carp. Hasn't worked for me today. I did feel I was on the fish, but do you know what? Right, we're in Mark's swim. This is Mark, and we're on a 2-rod rule here. We're used to fishing 3 rods, so 3 rods do give you a bit more scope, but fishery rules are fishery rules. We're on 2 rods, so Mark and I, when we arrived, we haven't caught anything. That's fishing. It's a tough lake. It's not an easy lake. It sees a lot of pressure. When we arrived, fish were very active at this end. It was a lot milder. It has gone a bit cooler. There were a lot of fish boshing around. We did hear even last night a few fish still mooching around, boshing around, but we're told by anglers further down the lake that during the night the fish moved down en masse down into the bottom part, and in fact one of the anglers down in the corner had a bit of a red letter night. He had 3 fish. One was a 14-pound koi, the other was a 26-pound mirror, and there was another large fish in that lot as well. Not quite sure how big, but a nice bit of fishing when you can get it. So when we arrived, Mark's picked this swim because it gave him a lot of options for the fish that were moving in. You know, there were quite a few fish knocking around this area. So Mark, bring us through where you put your rods. You've 2 rods, run through your rigs and your bait and your tactics and what you were thinking.
Right, well, one of the main reasons I picked this swim, Gerry, was there was no one to my right. Well, obviously you moved into my right, but directly opposite me there was no one in the swim, so basically there was no lines up this end of the lake. So being a smallish water, I'm not keen on having too many lines around me. It just puts the fish under too much pressure.
Yeah.
So I was happy that it was the only person who had access to this piece of water. And as you say, when we arrived yesterday, we did see a couple of fish show, sort of late morning to mid-afternoon, which was grand. But that activity definitely died off, and we're getting a couple of liners as well, which was promising. But since yesterday afternoon, mid-afternoon, it just died.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was temperature. I think, to be honest, it was more likely pressure.
Yeah.
With me moving in here, and I don't know. You never know, right? You know, you can try and guesstimate exactly what's happened in front of you, but
yeah.
You know, you just put it down to experience. But the fish have definitely moved down the far end of the lake, which is the deeper section. I don't know if that's a factor. Yes, the wind is a bit cooler today, but you know, they were up here for a reason over the last little while, but they've decided to move back down, which is odd because there's a lot of anglers down there as well.
Well, there was far more angling, a lot more angling pressure down the bottom end than there is up this end. So
yeah. So in terms of where I was fishing, not knowing the lake very well, like God, how many years it's been since we fished here? You know,
it's a long time.
Obviously, lots changed. The reeds have grown in the margins. You know, weeds developed, silt pockets developed, and so on and so forth. So I was going on the advice of a couple of the members here on Mick and Darren, who manage the fishery. They were saying over the far margin there, where all the reeds are,
there's a lily
beds are all over there, and those have all died back now. So there's dead lily stalks and everything in the margins, and they reckon that the fish are holed up there, because Mick was saying he's got out the thermometer and the water temperature is actually 2 degrees warmer in the dead lilies than it is in the main body of the lake.
That's standard on any lake.
So you know, it was as good a choice as anything. And like yourself, when I came down here, I had pre-tied rigs and so on and so forth. But again, had to change them all because of the nature of the bottom, because of the silt, because I was fishing in the dead lily stalks.
Very choddy out there.
Yeah, exactly. So I moved on to, I suppose, a variant of the chod. Not a chod in the strictest sense, you know, the short, stiff mono link. But I was fishing a helicopter style little PVA bag with maggots, because I thought, you know, in cold weather, if anything's going to get a bite, maggots, you know, produce. It's only the first week in January after all, you know. So that's what I was thinking. So yeah, I mean, one rod I was set, I knew what I was doing. You know, cast a couple of places, clipped up, so I was very happy that I had bait in a good position. The second rod, again, initially I was casting to the far margin because I had seen the fish move there, but I wasn't overly confident of where the bait was located, and also playing on my mind was the fact that there's a small island out here in front of me. Now, you know, if I had to take from that rod and I kited right, the island is close enough to me that, you know, the line would have gone over the island, but I didn't want to take any chances, so I reeled that rod in, and I've been fishing to the edge of this small island here in front of me now for a while. Apparently there's a small hole, a depression just back from the island. I haven't managed to find it because there's so much silt and so much weed out there. I don't want to get out there with a marker float and thrash the swim to a foam. So I'm just trying to feel the lead down and see what I'm feeling.
Problem is, it's too shallow to feel the lead down, because
it is a little bit. Yeah,
it hits the water, it's down. So
so you know, I'm doing best guess. At the minute on that rod, I'm fishing a little. I've gone back to basics. Little choddy Medusa. You know, the old classic super glue maggots to a cork ball, just in the notion that, you know, if there's a carp swimming past,
it might just have a go.
It could have a go, indeed.
What have you got on this rod in the bay?
I had got maggots on that.
Hasn't done anything.
So I've changed over to a pop-up with a little piece of high-vis corn on it, the plastic corn. Yeah. Just to again,
ringing in the changes.
Ringing in changes. Maggots haven't got me anything. So something visual, a little bit visual, a bit smelly. Yeah. Again, just whack it out there. I'm hoping for, you know, if there happens to be a fish up there mooching around the dead lily stalks, you know, it'll see it, have a go, and, you know, hopefully we'll nail it. But, you know, let's face it, it's the first week in January, and while a lad down on the far bank there has had 3 fish last night, you know, you don't expect to be hauling in these conditions. The only reason we're fishing at all is because the weather's unseasonably mild, and we thought it was worth a go. Yeah. You know, so yeah, look, it's a small lake. It does get very pressured. What I would like to be able to do on a water like this would be to start introducing a decent quality food bait, and you know, try and establish it, and it might give you a better chance. But the problem with it being such a small lake and very pressured, the fish can be very localized. So if you end up fishing, you know, one end of the lake but the fish are all up the other end, it doesn't matter whether how good your bait is or how, you know, how much they want that you have it. If they're not anywhere near you, what can you do?
Well, that's fishing through and through, isn't it?
It's fishing through and through, you know.
I mean, this water, I've already covered this. This water is without a doubt one of the busiest lakes in Ireland. Certainly, it's equatable to the UK in busyness. You know, like there's somebody fishing here 365 days a year.
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
There's always lines in the water. There's never a day go without somebody introducing bait, food, rigs. The fish know what it is. You know, these are pressure fish and they're not stupid. And gone are the days of hauling on this lake. You know, you're going to be really lucky to pull out 1 or 2 fish a session. Now, don't get me wrong, red letter days do happen, but they're fun.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be on the fish. They got to be having it, and you got to be feeding them something they want to eat.
Yeah.
To really have a result.
And you know, looking at hit and run tactics. You know, talk to Darren who runs the lake. It doesn't really happen for anglers. Most of the fish tend to come, especially in the warmer months, from somebody putting out a decent pile of bait in an area and getting them down to feed on it, and that tends to produce the results. You know, fishing single baits doesn't seem to produce. You know, people coming in for a day session doesn't really produce. It's somebody who's down for a couple of days, is quiet, sets out his rigs and doesn't keep recasting. That seems to be the key, you know, to catching on this lake at the moment. You know.
Yeah, I mean, things I've learned, Gerry. You know, I suppose the lessons. If you don't learn something every time you go fishing, you know, what's the point? I'd definitely be fishing solid PVA bags in the future. Not necessarily with pop-ups, but certainly maybe a wafter type bait, something with a little bit of buoyancy, so it's not going to sink down into the weed. Yeah. Because the weed is so patchy, and you know, yes, there are still patches, but it's so sporadic that you know, you don't know what you're going to land on. I'm certainly not that good a caster at being able to pinpoint, you know, a tiny little area like that. Yeah, give me something a little bit bigger, you know, sort of carbonate size. Yeah, I can probably do that at the ranges we're talking about here. Well, not the small areas that we have available to us. You only have to look here in the margin to see how the weed is interspersed with the silt. So yeah, solid PVA bags, and I think I'd also be switching over maybe to possibly a running lead with a slightly longer link on the lead. Yeah. Just to you know, if the lead's going to go into the silt or the weed, at least the bait and the presentation is going to be okay. Funnily enough, I mean, the very first time I fished this place, which is, God, when did it open? 9 years ago? Yeah. Something like that. I had 4 fish that weekend, and I did that by presenting, you know, about that long of a link on the lead, and I was fishing a very, 16-inch soft hook link with just about sinking cocktail of sweet corn and fake corn. Yeah. And I was just coming down, well, this is what I think was happening, I was just coming down gently, resting on the silt or the weed, whatever I'd cast into. And I was sitting there, very visual, fish moved along, had it. Yeah. So, but to be fair, I mean, the weed was much thicker back then. It is different now. The weed seems to be much lower on the lake bed, which is part of the problem. Yeah. You know, the lead is actually on the bottom. This is UK chod style fishing, in my mind, you know, choddy rigs all the way. Yeah, which is something that I've no experience of, to be honest. No, it's not something that any of us really do, because we don't normally fish that style of fishing, you know. But look, learning curves all the way for both of us. I mean, a couple of things that I did, and I'm sure you did the same thing as well, because I wanted to keep the lines out of the water and not spook the fish if they were resident here. You know, this was the plan. Didn't quite come to fruition, but I've got fluorocarbon mainline, which sinks very nicely. I'm also using back leads, keep the line really pinned down. Yeah. Because all the weed is low lying, I'm pretty sure that the line is very close to the bottom. Yeah. It's on or close to the bottom. If there were bigger weed beds, you know, it'd be going up and down and up over the weed beds. But because the type of weed it is, it's only no more than an inch off the bottom. So, you know, I was doing what I can to mitigate the challenge that we see in front of us. Well, I've actually got myself a big spool there of subline from Kildare, because it's a good sinking line, and I'm going to spool up with that later on. And for my next trip here, I will definitely be using that kind of situation, that tactic of keeping everything pinned down and close to the bottom, so that I don't spook the fish, because everybody else is using lines tight right out, like bowstrings out into the lake. So it's all about ringing the changes, you know. Yeah. But you know, we came here, we didn't have a huge amount of options and swims. This is not the swim I wanted. I would have preferred to have been on that bank. I think it offers a lot more options to fish to, which was proven right last night. One of the guys had a number of fish. And even yesterday morning, the 2 fish that came out were along that bank as well. Yeah,
I mean, that's been the producing, but unfortunately, when anything is known as a producing bank, it's always going to be stitched up. When you arrive, you have to take what you've got, and we really only had about 3 or 4 swims left to us. These looked the best because, you know, this one and this one, there were fish moving around. They have since moved off, I've no doubt in my mind. I don't think we've many fish in this corner at all now, if any. But we've got another few hours left. We may winkle out one yet. I'm not overly confident, but hey, that's fishing.
Look, I mean, you know, I recast my rods a little while ago. They're going to sit now till I leave.
Yeah, I did the same.
I'm happy with the way I've set them up, that the presentation is going to be acceptable.
As good as you're going to get.
As good as I'm going to get. So I'm just going to leave it sit. I'm not going to disturb the water anymore by casting out. Or one thing I will do on the rod that I have, the little Medusa rig, every 40 minutes or so, I'm just putting up a little PVA bag of maggots and just catapulting it out over it. Just keep something fresh and swim, because I don't know, is it in weed? Is it in silt? What are the maggots doing? Now I know I put a couple of PVA bags in the margins here, and the maggots are still there. They haven't wandered too far. No. But you know, give them a fresh target, something that's live, something wriggling. You never know what's going to trigger a feeding response. Yeah. You know, all you can do is try. You know, but as long as there's a bait in the water, you got a chance. Right, well that's it. That's Mark's swim. End of session. Bivvy's down. Rods are still out. I've got another 3 or 4 hours left to fish. I've pretty much fished a 30-hour session. I know, you know, a day and overnight, and the rest of the next day. When I arrived, we sat in the right location. Fish were around. They have moved. They moved down to the bottom end of the lake. We know that because anglers have seen them boshing around and lumping it about as they usually do. We've not really seen much up this end, and not really had any indication to say that there's fish around at all. Fishing in spots that I know will produce fish, fishing the right kind of bait, it just hasn't happened. But that's why they call it fishing and not catching. It's life. There's not really much more to say. I mean, the work that the 2 lads who run this place, Darren and Mick, have put in is just phenomenal. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, this lake is a pressured lake. It's equivalent to anything in the UK. There's at least 3 to 4 anglers on it every day, 365 days of the year. There's a lot of full-time anglers on it, and that's always a bit of a nightmare for guys like me who like to drop in and drop out and trying to catch the opportunistic fish. It doesn't give me much scope to fish here, because you know, you have to book in, and usually the swims that you would like to sit in are gone. On any given lake there's hot spots, but I don't really care about that, because I know fish move around. Even though they do locate in one area, they do move around. And that's all I'm looking for, is that one bite, one fish, and get on it, you know. So this has been my first foray into carping of the year, and a big fat blank. Well, I'm used to that anyway. That's fishing. So we're going to catch you on the next video. We'll have lots of more videos down the line for you. See you soon.